Hey, I'm Mac. Welcome back to my channel. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe and consider joining my Patreon for access to new videos 12 to 24 hours early. First of all, thank you, everybody. It's very exciting that I've reached 10,000. As far as I know, all you get for that is you can post stories. I don't know, but they still haven't given me that option. So I guess they think my stories would be too dangerous. But thank you to each and every one of you who has helped me get over that milestone. All right. As a disclaimer, this video is not medical advice. I have my doctorate in pharmacy, but I am not currently practicing pharmacy. I am not your pharmacist. I don't have your med profile in front of me, and I am not a nutritionist. And yes, everything I am holding in that image is Percocet. This video is my interpretation and summary of information that I have gathered through research conducted as part of a graduate capstone project, clinical rotations, continuing education, and personal research out of interest in this topic. I will be backing up what I can with citations. Some of it will be opinion, educated opinion, but still opinion. And I will specify when that is the case. Substantial sources for the information in this video were the books Fat Chance by Dr. Robert Lustig, Pure White and Deadly by Dr. John Yutkin, and The Case Against Sugar by health policy investigative journalist and pop science author Gary Taubes. All three books are highly well-sourced with footnotes and citations, as well as descriptions of research throughout, and they're not too technical for the average person to read. So they're a really good read if you want to get more information on this topic. If you've been conscious at any point in the last 20 to 30 years, something which people who knew me in my mid-20s would be shocked to know that I can say yes to, you would know that literally the worst thing currently happening and that has ever happened to people is people being fat. And the reason that people are fat is because they lack willpower. That's right. In the past 30 years, everybody in the industrialized and post-industrialized world collectively stopped having the willpower that every single human before them had, all at the same time, in what apparently is the biggest coincidence ever to happen in the history of the universe. If only they knew that we didn't approve of their clearly inferior choices and the health risks associated with them. I mean, some people might say that it is absolutely ludicrous to suggest that basic human behavior tendencies for hundreds of millions of people suddenly all changed collectively at the same time. In that instead there must be something else causing it. But if you're going to be logical about it, then how am I supposed to keep telling an unhelpful story with useless hand-wringing action items that have never helped a single person since the first bona fide piece of hog shit to think of them came up with them and began repeating them? Won't you just eat less already? All you have to do is eat fewer calories than you consume. Is it working? What if we keep repeating it? Eat less, stop eating. This is definitely going to fix everything, I can tell. So did that sound like the dumbest paragraph ever? Pretty ridiculous, right? Yet, that's basically the narrative that seemingly everybody, including people in positions of power and organizations that should know better, have been unironically repeating, seemingly oblivious to the fact that it has helped approximately nobody. It's a great time to vacuum. I'm sure some of you were a bit nervous clicking on this video, concerned that yet another skinny person is going to tell you about how you've fucked up and you're literally valueless as a human being. That's not this video. The obesity epidemic narrative harms everybody, including me. We'll get to that later. So in today's video, we're going to describe and examine the current metabolic and endocrine crisis in the US and around the industrialized world. Is the problem actually obesity? Is it the right problem to focus on? Does the amount of energy we expend on it make any sense? And does that energy and those resources have any positive effect whatsoever? Or does obesity simply co-occur with things that are problems? And what are those bigger issues? Next, we'll debunk some of the infuriatingly persistent bullshit that is repeated so frequently, you'd be forgiven for thinking it was supported by evidence and not just a weirdly, intensely held belief some douchebag had. And then we're going to take a look at some of the basics of metabolism with a little bit of biochemistry for good measure, because it's really important to helping us get to the actual root of what's going on here. And hint, it's sugar. And then in the next video, or the video after that, in this little series, we'll take a look at why the nutritional information landscape is the confusing, contradictory hellscape that it is, and how large food companies like Coca-Cola and sugar manufacturers influenced and continue to influence what should be objective scientific publications, as well as the capture of regulatory and professional health organizations by those food companies. The obesity epidemic, quote unquote, has received so much attention and discussion in recent decades that you'd be forgiven for never having stopped to consider why that is. After all, obesity has never been a leading cause of death and is not typically listed on a death certificate. Rather, obesity is asserted to be a cause of other potentially life-threatening conditions, namely cardiovascular disease like heart attack and stroke, diabetes, high blood pressure or hypertension, high levels of bad cholesterol and low levels of good cholesterol, which would be dyslipidemia. This cluster of diseases is actually what's known as metabolic syndrome because of how commonly they co-occur. Other metabolic diseases that correlate with obesity are polycystic ovarian syndrome, renal disease, which is kidney disease, and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And notice that I said correlation, not causation. The big issue with the paradigm of the obesity epidemic is that it relies on a presumption of causality between obesity and the conditions we actually care about that lead to suffering, skyrocketing medical costs, quality of life reduction, and death. Except we don't actually have evidence of the causality. We have evidence that it is correlated. It's a symptom. It frequently co-occurs with metabolic and cardiovascular disease, but it doesn't always. So is it not possible that one thing is causing both obesity and metabolic diseases rather than one thing causing obesity, which then causes metabolic disease? Yes, and really, that's the more logical conclusion. Is it useful to conceptualize it from the standpoint of obesity being the primary problem? No, because then you'll subject healthy people to unnecessary treatment, and you will miss and fail to prevent these same metabolic diseases in people who are not obese because you will have been so busy patting them on the back and telling them that they can eat whatever they want with no consequences, when that is just not the case. This is one of the ways that the obesity epidemic narrative harms everybody, including people who are thinner like me. I happen to have idiopathic high blood pressure, meaning it is kind of unclear and mysterious why it is high, even with no stimulants like caffeine and no medications, despite the fact that I'm active for 10 plus hours on any given workday and 5 to 15 hours on any of the day that I have off, including running 3 miles 7 days a week at least. So it's not clear why this is happening. But it's surprisingly difficult to get a primary care physician to take that seriously with me. And it is my opinion that the reason for that is the fact that we have so strongly associated cardiovascular and other risks to weight. We now have this dangerous heuristic where we assume that someone who is overweight is at risk of everything when maybe they are not. And we assume that if someone is thin, then they're not at risk when they absolutely could be. I actually had to persuade my doctor to get some damn lisinopril. It's ridiculous. So, what is the real metabolic health crisis? The biggest cause of the cost, suffering, and mortality attributed to the obesity epidemic by far is diabetes. Diabetes collectively refers to a medical condition in which glucose, which is a type of sugar and is the preferred fuel for most cells, levels in the bloodstream are chronically elevated because the hormone insulin is either absent altogether or it is not functioning properly. We will discuss insulin in a little bit more detail later in this video, and then if it's interesting to people, I'll make another one. So diabetes is broken down into two categories. Type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease in which the cells of the pancreas that produce insulin are destroyed by the immune system. About 5 to 10% of the cases of diabetes in the United States are type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes treatment always involves either multiple daily insulin injections in relation to meals, or an insulin pump that uses an implanted port is also an option. Some of these pumps are pretty fancy, by the way, and I believe some of them can talk to your glucometer and via like Bluetooth or Wi-Fi or USB, and can help you like calculate or adjust the amount of insulin to use. In some cases, there may be other medications added on, but that's not normal. It's first and foremost, it must include insulin. And that's due to the fact that the body is not making any insulin at all because the cells that produced it were destroyed. The other main category of diabetes is type 2 diabetes, which is a chronic disease that is caused by a combination of lifestyle factors and genetic factors leading to insulin resistance, meaning that insulin is present, but it's not working. For the purposes of this video, type 2 diabetes is going to be what we're discussing because the dietary factors leading to type 2 diabetes is what this video is about. Type 1 diabetes is another can of worms entirely, and honestly, in my opinion, it would be a more accurate and useful categorization and stop associating them in the first place because it causes a lot of confusion and it does very little to enhance the understanding of these conditions. They have completely different treatments. You know, they don't even receive the same treatment at all. So in terms of prevalence, type 2 is about 16 times more prevalent than type 1. In 2007, 17.5 million people in the United States had diagnosed diabetes, which is about 5.8% of the population. 5 years later, in 2012, that was up to 22.3 million, or 7%. In 2017, that had increased to 24.5 million, or 7.6% of the population. And in 2019, it was up to 8.7%. This is a disaster. Why? Because in 2017, about $237 billion in medical expenditure was directly attributable to diabetes, adding up to 14% of total medical expenditure in the US. 17% of prescriptions written in the US were written for the treatment of diabetes. 1 in 7 inpatient hospital days were directly attributable to diabetes. 5% of all emergency department visits were diabetes related. The average annual medical expenditure for those with diabetes is about 2.3 times higher than it would be expected without diabetes. Diabetes is the first leading cause of kidney failure, lower limb amputation, and adult onset blindness. Diabetes is currently the 7th leading cause of death in the United States. Risk of mortality at any given time is 2 to 4 times higher in those with diabetes than those without. 85,000 deaths had diabetes listed as the primary cause in 2017. 111,000 deaths were the result of cardiovascular disease directly attributable to diabetes, which is about 16% of all deaths from cardiovascular disease in 2017. 42,000 deaths from stroke were directly attributable to diabetes, or 28% of all deaths from stroke in 2017. 39,000 deaths from kidney failure, or 54% of all deaths from kidney failure, were directly attributable to diabetes. The medical costs associated with diabetes increased from $188 billion in 2012 to $237 billion in 2017, when adjusted for inflation, which is a growth of over 26%. So this is the actual problem here, along with other metabolic diseases. And it's only getting worse. It is getting worse at an accelerating rate. It is not sustainable. This is very quickly going to become something that we simply cannot afford. Most curiously, it is a relatively recent problem. Diabetes was known to many cultures in history, but it was an extremely rare condition. In 1890, Dr. Robert Sonder, the president of the Royal Medical Society of Edinburgh, in a presentation to the Royal College of Physicians, estimated that about 1 in 50,000 people had diabetes, and that it could not really be studied except by physicians at large research hospitals in major population centers due to the rarity of the condition, making it difficult to find patients. He further remarked that an American physician practicing in Los Angeles had told him that in 7 years of practice, he had not seen even a single case of diabetes. A statement that would be ludicrous from any physician today. Nonetheless, he advised that among certain specific classes of people, notably the commercial wealthy class, it was starting to become more common. In 1924, the New York City Health Commissioners Haven Emerson and Louise Larimore published an analysis finding that mortality from diabetes had risen by 400% since 1900 and by 1,500% since the end of the American Civil War. An analysis by statisticians for the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company in 1934 found that about 0.2 to 0.3% of Americans had diabetes. That's 2 to 3 in 1,000. As a reminder, the rate was 8.7% in 2019. Diabetes is now 44 times more common than it was just under 100 years ago. What the hell is going on? Seriously, what the fuck is going on? How can this be? It gets even worse though, because there are other conditions caused by insulin resistance that are rising in prevalence. Diabetes is not diagnosed by looking at levels of insulin resistance. It is diagnosed by blood sugar or HbA1c levels. Therefore, it is possible to have insulin resistance without it being diabetes. These conditions are the ones that make up the metabolic syndrome that I was talking about and related conditions that I described earlier. This is a crisis, and it's one that demands a more substantial cause than hand-waving and proclaiming that millions of people have simply, of their own accord, coincidentally and simultaneously all decided that being fat, lazy, and gluttonous was the real way to be, and that we could have this all solved if we would only bully them hard enough that they would just eat less. Let's begin our exploration of how we got here by going through a few of the bullshit concepts that have underpinned the profoundly unhelpful paradigm for far too long. Because unfortunately, the current paradigm is a key component of what got us into this mess. Perhaps the most fundamental assumption and assertion in the common obesity epidemic narrative is a calorie is a calorie. I mean, it sounds logical and obvious enough, which is exactly what makes it a dangerous assertion. It's a statement which doesn't invite a lot of skepticism or critical examination. It's also a prerequisite if you are going to deploy the whole personal responsibility argument, where you incredibly helpfully and productively assert that if people are obese, it is their own fault and that's all there is to it. Yet we already know that a calorie is not even close to telling the whole story, because you don't even have to think about it for that long. Take a look at some of these advertisements from the 1950s. Ready? They're so good. Let's see. So in this one, we have the question, which is less fattening? And then we have half of a medium grapefruit, which looks pretty delicious, coming in at 75 calories. And over here, we have 3 teaspoons of domino sugar, which, you know, totally looks as satisfying. and that juicy grapefruit, but whatever. The point is that it's only 54 calories, you guys. That means it's less fattening than the grapefruit, because a calorie is a calorie, and the domino sugar has fewer calories than the grapefruit. Therefore, grapefruit is more fattening than pure sugar. Then we have this woman here who understandably appears to be rolling her eyes at the sugar, while also demonstrating that she has, if I'm reading this measuring tape correctly, an approximately 4 3/4 inch or 12 centimeter waist circumference, which it makes sense. I mean, it must be all the sugar. And the marketing copy reads, only 18 calories per teaspoon in Domino pure cane sugar, and they're all quick energy. I mean, thank God, you definitely do not want to fuck around with that slow energy, okay? Yes, only 18 calories per teaspoon in Domino pure cane sugar, and they're all quick energy calories. You just fucking said that. I guess it's not good for your memory. Energy your body needs every day. And remember, it's a scientific fact that sugar gives you energy faster than any other food. So, while you hold down your weight, lift up your energy with Domino sugar. Oh, and then we've got this little box here. It says, now, a Domino sugar custom made for perfect, quote, no cook, unquote, icings. Domino Confectioner's 10x powdered sugar, by Gary V, makes the smoothest icings ever because it's 50% finer than old style frosting sugars. For goodness sake, ... Put Domino 10x frosting on every cake you bake. Easy to follow recipes on each package. Yeah, Jesus Christ, Brenda, would it kill you to fire up the oven and make something from scratch every once in a while? Okay, I drive a Dodge Stratus. Then it puts this little maraschino cherry of a statement on top of this surreal ice cream sundae of batshit crazy marketing copy. ... More women use Domino than any other sugar. I just find that to be a fascinating, almost mysterious little statement here. More women use Domino than any other sugar. Is that because you would use it while cooking? And since this is the 1950s, the very idea that a man might cook is just ludicrous? I'm so confused. Let's see if this next ad clears it up so we can stop our certain death by grapefruit. Okay, in this ad, we've got massive sans serif capitals asking us, which is less fattening? And we have what appears to be a disgusting red delicious apple because nobody had any sense of taste in the 1950s. And then on the left-hand side, we have what I'm assuming is 3 teaspoonfuls of powdered cocaine hydrochloride. And the copy reads, 3 teaspoons of pure domino sugar. Oh, shit, you guys. It's sugar. Okay. It's sugar. My bad. Contain fewer calories than 1 medium apple. I mean, I still would have been right, but whatever. And, exclamation point, 3 teaspoons of domino sugar contain fewer calories than 3 raw carrots. Does it contain few calories than 3 cooked carrots? That is so confusing. Even 5 teaspoons contain fewer calories than 1 frankfurter. Boy, the 1950s were really a different time when your go-to example for comparing the number of calories is a frankfurter. I mean, it's fewer calories than a frankfurter, you guys. I mean, what more do you fucking want? Now make yourself a dang quesadilla. Counting calories nowadays, in quotation marks, you should know that generous amounts of domino granulated sugar, generous amounts, used in your favorite foods and beverages contain fewer calories than usual servings of many foods regularly included in reducing diets. Okay, but doesn't that mean that I'm getting like 2 servings at one time then, if it's my favorite food plus the sugar? And was a frankfurter seriously a part of a reducing diet in the 1950s? What the fuck? Nutritionists say that no single food is fattening unless you take in more calories than your body uses up. Apples, carrots, and ... frankfurters ... are excellent foods ... Okay, but are they though? ... But sugar too is nutritionally important in the well-balanced diet you need for good health. Incredible. So don't deny yourself the pleasure of all the extra flavor that domino sugar adds to your daily meals. And always insist on domino pure cane sugar because only one sugar is domino pure. The extra flavor of sugar. Yeah. What a very white 1950s thing to say. Sugar is so spicy, you guys. Okay, so let's continue. So we've got this man here displaying a suspiciously enthusiastic grin, and he's all, sure, I love sugar, with a capital S, but I'm watching my weight. And this woman here, who I'm going to assume is his wife, she's all, you need sugar for energy, and even 3 teaspoons of domino sugar contain fewer calories than your apple. And then we can see that she's spooning some white crystalline substance that is definitely pure domino sugar and totally not laced with arsenic into her husband's coffee. Because she knows that people need sugar, okay? Before domino pure cane sugar was invented, literally everybody died, so that proves it, okay? The copy reads, it's smart to stay slim and trim and get Domino's quote unquote energy lift too. Sure, you need Domino sugar to sweeten coffee, tea, and your favorite foods. Are they really your favorite foods if you need to sweeten them by adding sugar? But equally important, ... Domino sugar supplies quick -energy - fast. Faster than any other food. It sure does. That statement aged poorly. What's more, there are only 18 calories in a teaspoon of domino sugar. That's fewer calories than many reducing diet foods, like frankfurters. So if you're reducing, remember, quote, sugar-starved, unquote, people often lose pep and energy instead of weight, just as apples are famous for their health values, in a well-balanced diet, Domino pure cane sugar helps supply the quick food-energy you need every day for pep and vitality. So be smart, ... Use a sensible amount of satisfying, low-calorie, high-energy domino sugar at every meal, for only one sugar is domino pure. Low-calorie, high-energy. Low-calorie, high-energy. Isn't that an oxymoron? Incredible. You know, despite the fact that the calorie is literally a unit of energy. Of course, what's happening here is they are deliberately or even unintentionally conflating two different meanings of the word energy. This is a common theme in the marketing that the food and diet industry does. There's the scientific definition from thermodynamics of the word energy, meaning the quantitative property recognizable in the exertion of force on surroundings or in the form of light or heat, which is the definition that we're talking about when we're talking about food-energy or how many calories something has. That's not the same as what we're talking about when we say, like, caffeine gives me so much energy, because after all, caffeine doesn't have any dietary calories. Instead, we mean the subjective feeling of strength, vigor, vitality in terms of physical, but especially mental capacity. The point is, we know immediately that these ads are such an extreme level of bullshit that it is absurd and hilarious. Why? Because a calorie is not a calorie. These ads would be completely logical if a calorie is a calorie were true. Even if you can't quite articulate why these ads are full of shit, you know that that's not how anything works. But we'll get to that when we cover sugar. The other problem with saying that a calorie is a calorie as an admonishment to eat less and exercise more is that it is not possible to simply exercise away the sheer volume of calories in our food supply currently. Let's play a guessing game. Seriously. Ready? How many Oreos per mile of running can you have if you want to burn them all off? A mile is 1,600 meters. That would be slightly less than 2 Oreos for every mile you run. Running 1 mile burns approximately 100 calories, and there are 53 calories in 1 Oreo. The vast majority of calorie burn in a given day consists of your basal metabolic rate. You can increase your basal metabolic rate by building more muscle mass, but for the most part, this is mostly out of our control. And here is the problem with the a calorie is a calorie, calories in, calories out paradigm, because your body can adjust the basal metabolic rate depending on a bunch of different factors. Could be hormonal signals, could be diet, could be stress, could be activity level. So while the concept of calories in, calories out it's technically true, you really only have control over a very small slice of the calories out portion. The reason to exercise is not weight loss. The reason to exercise is because it prevents early death. Here's the other problem with a calorie is a calorie. The problem is that the people saying it are the same fucking morons telling us to avoid saturated fat at any cost. But wait, I thought a calorie was a calorie. Yeah, exactly. Even the people saying it know that it isn't true. It's especially not true when we're talking about carbohydrates, by the way, because there are two main types. There's starches, which are chains of glucose molecules, and simple sugars, which would be glucose when it is alone in a simple molecule, fructose, and sucrose. Glucose is not particularly sweet on its own to taste. Sucrose is table sugar, and it is composed of a glucose molecule bonded to a fructose molecule. Fructose, or fruit sugar, is very, very sweet. When fructose is in its natural state, locked in a big matrix of fiber and other nutrients as part of a piece of fruit, it's not a big problem. When it is added in the form of sucrose or high fructose corn syrup, it is basically more evil than Satan and responsible for like 90% of the current clusterfuck of metabolic disease. Did I just spoil the ending? We'll cover more of this in the sugar video. The point is, the quality of what we eat will greatly influence how much we end up eating and whether we feel like burning it off or not. A calorie is not a calorie. The next piece of unhelpful bullshit is the assertion that obesity is simply the result of a personal failing or a lack of personal responsibility. Okay, think about it this way. When are times when it is normal to gain weight? What about puberty? What about pregnancy? So when someone is pregnant and gains weight, is that because they are choosing to eat more? Or is there an uncontrollable drive to eat more because the baseline set point has gone up as a result of hormonal changes? So is it not possible that hormone levels could be responsible for weight gain in situations other than pregnancy and puberty? If that's the case, then is it really the personal responsibility issue that we say it is? How about when we consider that many of the food choices marketed to us are scientifically designed to be as addictive as possible? Again, in the sugar video. You're really teasing that one, huh? We're going to close out this introductory video to the obesity epidemic series with a few key concepts about metabolism and body composition. Evidence is piling up suggesting that body fat is not all equal in terms of health risks. Body fat can be divided into two main types. There's subcutaneous fat, which is basically everything that Sir Mix-a-Lot is talking about. And that has minimal or possibly no link to health risks, and it might even be protective, actually. And then the other type is visceral fat or central obesity or abdominal obesity, which is not measured by BMI, but rather by waist to hip ratio or by body volume index, both of which have a very, very strong correlation with type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease, much more so than BMI does. Visceral fat also responds more to exercise than subcutaneous fat does, which could be why a lot of evidence suggests that being overweight and active is associated with lower health risks than being sedentary and thin. Visceral fat is deposited in the abdomen, and it basically wraps around organs like the liver, the pancreas, which has a lot of hormonal and metabolic consequences, the most important of which being insulin resistance, which can result in diabetes type 2 and other complications. There's also another important hormone that you don't hear discussed quite as often called leptin. Leptin is released when there are high levels of energy stored in the fat cells, and it causes feelings of satiety and inhibition of hunger. Leptin resistance is also frequently seen associated with visceral fat. So in addition to the effects of insulin resistance, we would also have the inability to sense satiety, and we would have uninhibited hunger signals. Now, there is one food in particular that is extremely strongly associated with visceral fat deposition, more so than any other. And it will be the topic of the next video. Sugar. And on that dramatic reveal, that's where it's going to be at to be continued. Come back next time for how sugar is wrecking the world metabolically. You're going to wish it was just empty calories. I've been Mac. Peace out. Bye!